Imagine you're a 9-year-old boy and you have not one, but two powerful voices guiding you in life. One says, go to school and get good grades. Find a secure job. The other says, learn how money works. Make money work for you. This isn't fiction. This was Robert Kiyosaki's real life. He grew up listening to two contrasting philosophies. His biological father, highly educated, respected in society but financially struggling, and his best friend's father, less formally educated but incredibly wealthy and financially free. These two men became his poor dad and rich dad, and from a very young age, Robert began to notice something strange. Both dads were hard-working, both were smart, but only one of them was getting richer. Robert's poor dad would often say, I can't afford it. But rich dad would challenge him to think differently. How can I afford it? That one small change in thinking made all the difference. Poor dad saw money as a source of stress. Rich dad saw money as a tool, a game to be mastered. Robert realized the rich don't work for money. They make money work for them. And this was just the beginning of a lifelong journey of unlearning everything he thought he knew about success. Most people work jobs they hate, buy things they can't afford, to impress people they don't even like. Why? Because they're afraid. Afraid of being broke, afraid of failure, afraid of not being good enough. Poor dad believed in job security. He thought a paycheck was safety. But rich dad knew the truth. Fear is what keeps people stuck in the rat race. Robert saw how the system was designed to produce employees, not entrepreneurs. And the fear of not having money is what keeps the average person working 9 to 5 forever. Poor dad had PhDs. He believed in the power of academic education. He thought the school system would prepare Robert for life. But rich dad said, schools teach you how to be a good employee. They don't teach you how to make money. Rich dad taught Robert things like assets versus liabilities, passive income, importance of investing, business and taxes. He said, it's not how much money you make, it's how much you keep. That changed everything. At just 9 years old, Robert started working for rich dad's business, doing small tasks at a grocery store for just 10 cents an hour. After weeks of boring, repetitive work, Robert finally had enough. He went to rich dad and complained, you're not paying me enough. Rich dad smiled. This was a test. He said, most people trade time for money. If you want to be rich, you must learn something different. It wasn't about the money, it was about the lesson. Rich dad offered Robert a strange deal. Work for free, and I'll teach you how the rich think. Robert was confused. Work without pay? But he trusted rich dad and agreed. Soon, he started seeing things others didn't. How businesses made money. How the store owner leveraged systems and people. And most importantly, opportunities are only visible to trained minds. This was Robert's first exposure to financial intelligence. Rich dad broke it down simply. An asset puts money in your pocket. A liability takes money out. It was so simple, yet so powerful. Robert realized his house wasn't an asset unless it generated income. His car wasn't an asset. A job wasn't security, but rental properties. Stocks, businesses, and those were assets. Most people confuse luxury with wealth. But rich dad made it clear, buy luxuries with income from assets, not from your salary. The rich buy assets. Those assets generate income. That income is used to buy more assets, and the cycle continues. It's called the wealth loop. Poor dad saved money, but inflation ate away its value. Rich dad invested money, and time multiplied its value. The difference wasn't effort, it was strategy. Most people earn more money, and their expenses rise with it. They buy bigger homes, newer cars, fancier stuff. This is the rat race. You run faster, but never escape. Robert saw his poor dad trapped in this loop. Meanwhile, Rich Dad focused on financial freedom, not salary, not promotions, but ownership and income-producing assets. Rich Dad always said, "It's not about being rich, it's about being smart with money." Financial literacy isn't taught in schools, but it determines how your entire life unfolds. Robert decided to become a student of money, not just how to earn it, but how to grow it, protect it, and multiply it. This mindset was his greatest asset. People don't just make money decisions with logic, they make them with emotion. Fear makes them cling to jobs. Desire makes them spend more than they earn. Rich Dad taught Robert, master your emotions, or your emotions will master your money. This is why most people stay poor, even when they get a raise. As Robert grew older, he realized how rare Rich Dad's wisdom was. It wasn't just about becoming rich. It was about becoming free, free from fear, free from dependency, free to choose your life. He made a promise to himself. I will not work for money. I will create a life where money works for me. And that was the beginning of a financial revolution. It was a bright Saturday morning, and just like the week before, Robert and Mike were excited. They had agreed to meet Rich Dad again. But this time, something was different. They thought Rich Dad would teach them about how to make money faster, maybe some magic trick or hidden formula. But Rich Dad just smiled and said, "The most powerful lessons are the ones life teaches you when you're not getting paid." This confused them. He gave them the same offer again. Work at his stores for free. No money, no extra time, just experience. And Robert thought, what kind of lesson is this? I want to be rich, not a fool. But Mike looked at Robert and whispered, "He's testing us. Let's go along. Maybe there's something deeper." Rich Dad sat them down and said something that hit hard. Most people work for money and become slaves to it. He explained how people get a job, get a paycheck, and then increase their spending. They buy a better phone, a bigger car, or go out more. And then they need that job to survive. That's the rat race. Fear and greed control people, he said. Fear of being poor, greed to get more, and they never learn how money works. Robert realized something. No school was going to teach him this. This wasn't math. This wasn't grammar. This was real-life money truth. Rich Dad leaned in and said slowly, "The poor and middle class work for money. The rich make money work for them." Boom. Robert's brain exploded. Make money work for me. He'd never heard this in school. He'd never heard it from his real dad. And yet, it made perfect sense. If you work only for money, you give up control. You get stuck in fear. You settle for comfort. And comfort is the enemy of progress. That one sentence changed everything. Rich Dad asked, "When people get scared, what do?" Robert replied, "They panic." Exactly, Rich Dad nodded. People make money decisions emotionally, not logically. They fear losing money, so they never invest. Or they chase get-rich-quick schemes and end up broke. He taught them that controlling your emotions around money is more powerful than having degrees or big salaries. The moment money controls your emotions, you lose. Robert thought back to his real dad's fear of job loss, of promotions, of salary cuts. It was all fear. Rich Dad gave them a strange task. Go to my store, watch people, learn how they spend, what they complain about, what they ignore. It sounded boring, but they did it. After a few days, Robert noticed patterns. Some customers came daily and bought the same things. Some complained about prices but still bought. Some asked for products the store didn't have. Rich Dad asked, "Now what do you learn?" And Robert said, There are problems to solve, needs to be filled. Rich Dad smiled. That's the mind of an entrepreneur. Another powerful moment came when Rich Dad asked, if you only get paid when you work, what happens when you stop working? They were silent. You stay broke. Rich Dad said, rich people build assets that earn for them even when they sleep. An asset could be a business, real estate, stocks, or even intellectual property. That was the key. Don't sell time. Build systems. One day, Robert complained, this work is so boring. Rich Dad smiled and said, most people quit when things get boring. That's why they remain average. He taught them that mastery comes through boredom, through repetition, through doing what others avoid. If you can stay focused when it's boring, you can handle money when it's exciting. Rich Dad told them, fear is not real. It's just a signal. Most people avoid fear instead of understanding it. He said, people fear being poor, so they chase jobs. They fear criticism, so they never take risks. They fear mistakes, so they never grow. But fear is also your teacher. Don't run from it, study it. This changed Robert. He began to look into fear, not away from it. One Saturday, Rich Dad shocked them. He said, I'm raising your pay from $0 to $5 per week. Robert smiled. Finally, a reward. But then Rich Dad said, you can take the money or continue learning with no pay. Your choice. Mike looked at Robert. Robert looked at Mike, and they both said, we'll keep learning. That decision made them different from 99% of people. Rich Dad asked, why do you think I made you work in my store for free? Robert replied, to teach us about business. Yes, but also, Rich Dad continued, to teach you about people. He explained how understanding human behavior is the ultimate financial skill. People buy on emotion. People repeat habits. People complain. And those complaints are business ideas. That insight was golden. As they wrapped up that day, Rich Dad said something unforgettable. Money is not the goal. A trained mind is. He explained how people can win the lottery and lose it all because their minds weren't trained for wealth. If you want to be rich, don't focus on money. Focus on becoming a person who attracts and multiplies money. Robert walked home that day, not with cash, but with a mind full of gold. Rich Dad sat Robert down again and said, Robert, school teaches you many things, math, history, science, but it misses the most important lesson, how money works. Robert thought to himself, that's true. Why haven't I learned this before? Rich Dad explained. Financial education means learning how money is made, how it grows, and how you can secure your life with it. Robert decided then and there that financial education would be his top priority from now on. Rich Dad handed them a notebook and said, Robert, assets are things that put money into your pocket. Liabilities are things that take money out. Robert thought about his family home. He always believed it was an asset. Rich Dad said, if your house costs you money every month, maintenance, loan payments, taxes, then it's a liability, not an asset. Robert was stunned. He learned that true wealth comes from acquiring assets like rental properties, stocks, or businesses that generate income. Rich Dad explained, those who work only for money will never be financially free. Freedom comes when money works for you. Robert wondered, what is passive income? Rich Dad smiled and said, passive income is money you earn without actively working. Rent, dividends, business profits. Robert understood that relying only on a paycheck was risky and started thinking about building passive income streams. Rich Dad emphasized that wealthy people aren't afraid of risk, but their risks are calculated. Without risk, you cannot succeed. And Robert's friend Mike was scared of risk and often said, "Risk is dangerous." But Rich Dad said, "The biggest risk is not taking any risk at all." Robert decided to learn how to evaluate risks smartly instead of avoiding them. Rich Dad said, "Wealth is more than money. It's a mindset." Robert realized this meant thinking positively, being open to learning, and accepting failure as a stepping stone. Many people believe, "I can't be rich," but Rich Dad taught him, if you believe in yourself, anything is possible. Robert began changing his mindset accordingly. Rich Dad said, "Whether you have a business or a job, sales and communication skills are vital." Robert realized that no matter how good his ideas were, without the ability to communicate and persuade, he would struggle. At Rich Dad's stores, Robert learned how to listen to customers, understand their needs, and convince them, skills he knew would change his future. Rich Dad said, "Failure isn't your enemy, it's your teacher." Robert noticed that many people feared failure and gave up. But Rich Dad explained, those who learn from failure are the ones who succeed. Robert started viewing every mistake as a lesson and motivation to keep going. Rich Dad explained that when you work a job, you sell your time for money. But when you own a business, you create systems that make money for you. Robert learned that owning a business leads to freedom and wealth. He began thinking about how to turn his ideas into systems that could work without him constantly. Rich Dad warned, never blindly trust financial advisors. Robert realized some advisors work for commissions and may not have his best interests in mind. He decided to educate himself and make informed decisions. Knowledge gave him control over his finances. Rich Dad explained that taxes and debt could be friends or enemies, depending on how you use them. Robert learned the rich use tax laws to their advantage and use good debt to buy assets. In contrast, poor people often use debt to buy liabilities. This understanding changed Robert's approach to money management. Rich Dad stressed, your network shapes your mindset and opportunities. Robert started building relationships with mentors, investors, and entrepreneurs. He realized success rarely comes alone. It grows with support and collaboration. Rich Dad reminded Robert, financial education is a lifelong journey. Robert committed to continuous learning, knowing there is no finish line. He embraced the excitement of growing his knowledge every day, bringing him closer to his dreams. Robert had always believed that having a steady job was the safest way to live. His safe government job seemed like the ultimate security. But one day, Rich Dad sat him down and said, "Robert, job security is an illusion. Companies close, economies crash, and no paycheck is guaranteed forever. Real security comes from financial freedom. Having money work for you, not you working for money." Robert was shocked. This was the first time he truly questioned everything he believed about stability. He realized that relying solely on a job was risky, and it scared him. But deep inside, he knew Rich Dad was right.